Hey folks, we're back once again with a review of a charming little inventory management roguelike. Is it a tidy and enjoyable experience, or an irritating mess? This is the good, the bad, and the bland of Backpack Hero. I suppose the easiest way to describe the moment-to-moment gameplay of Backpack Hero is to call it a deck builder, a sentiment that the user-defined Steam tags would seem to agree with, but that doesn't quite do the game justice. So while yes, you have energy to use objects, block that disappears at the end of turn, a 3-area gameplay loop, and are able to see enemy intent, there's another layer to stuff going on, primarily the inventory management aspect. In a typical run, you will start with a small amount of space, usually just enough to hold your starting gear, but as you defeat enemies and gain experience, you'll level up and be able to add extra spaces into your bag however you'd like, which will come in handy as after almost every fight, you'll be offered an assortment of items to potentially add to your bag, giving you more options in how you want to approach fights. Some of those items will require very specific placements to get their effects activated, causing you to have to make some tough choices around what you want to take and how creatively you can manage to fit all the things you want to have into the available spaces that you made. Now in terms of gameplay variety, Backpack Hero offers a fair few options, both in the sense that it has hundreds upon hundreds of items to find, alongside 5 characters with differing mechanics, allowing for quite a slew of different build options, but also by having an optional story mode as well as the standard roguelite style. Now the story mode has its own town building aspect that sees the player slowly unlocking new items and characters for future runs, and slowly introduces the players to how the game functions, with challenge runs to unlock even further options. And then there's the standard roguelite option, where you can immediately play with any character with all items available through a standard or modified run. That's enough basic rundown for now. Let's start going over what I thought worked well for the game. I think the inventory management aspect is a fantastic little feature for a game like this, as you will almost always want more things than you can fit and are sometimes very incentivized to take less things with you, making you make hard decisions about what else to cut from your bag to fully optimize what you're doing. The variety of viable builds also helps the game feel like there's a lot of room for experimentation with each character. And speaking of characters, I really appreciate how different each one of them feels overall, with each one playing with the idea of how you manage your inventory space in different ways. I also found the overall art and music direction to be fantastic and very complementary to each other, with the soundtrack constantly getting stuck in my head. I also haven't dabbled with them at all because I tend to want my reviews to focus more on the baseline experience of a game, but I do think it's worth pointing out that the game inherently supports mods, and as someone who's gotten a lot of entertainment mileage out of Slay the Spire mods, I can appreciate a game being willing to support its modding community that way. But now it's time to move on to some things that I found really marred my experience with this game. I have to preface this section a bit by stating that I know this game has a very small dev team, so I am certain that some of these things are probably being worked on, and I don't want to come off as too hard on them. But I have to talk about my current experiences with the product, so just keep that in mind, because one of my biggest complaints right now is the sheer amount of bugs that I ran into, particularly with the character Tote. Now, Tote's gimmick in regards to the inventory management is that you don't actually have to manage the inventory between fights as much, because she has a separate pouch that makes her work much more like a standard deck builder, with you drawing a certain number of carvings each turn and being able to place them into your inventory space however you would like, which means taking item rewards is more about how you want to manage your chances of drawing what you need versus the utility it can provide. I actually really like the way this functions in general, but there's a slight problem with item rewards that came up far too often and kept bothering me through playing as her. Normally with the other characters, when you get an item reward, you can move the item around by dragging and dropping, useful for when items occasionally stack up on top of each other in rewards, since they can sometimes just spawn into a random spot outside of your bag. But because of how you don't have to actually manage inventory space with Tote, it did not seem to allow me to drag and drop and would instead just automatically add the item to my bag if I attempted to drag something. eventually ending up with me just ignoring any items that stacked on each other to avoid the hassle. There were also a few minor bugs here and there, usually something like missing text or an item randomly appearing that can't be interacted with upon reloading a run, but those aren't as gameplay impacting, just noticeable. And while I think the inclusion of the story mode is a nice touch and has the potential to help people newer to the deck builder genre get used to the mechanics of the game, I personally felt it takes things almost too slow and requires too much repetition of lower end challenges to unlock the rest of the dungeons and cool items to do things with, which made a lot of the early sections of it feel very samey and less engaging than it could have been. The story mode also requires almost all of the main progression events to be done by the main character Purse, so playing as the other characters you unlock can feel a bit lackluster and limiting as well in that mode specifically. And now onto the stuff in this game that I feel will really depend more on personal preferences. In terms of difficulty, I found that a base run of Backpack Hero is fairly easy to break and make yourself completely overpowered, which can be quite hilarious, but also not the best thing for those seeking a challenge. Although after you finish beating the boss of a normal run, you are given the option to continue on in an endlessly looping mode that does spike the difficulty by a rather large amount, and can provide quite a bit of challenge there should you be looking for that. As previously stated, there are also a lot of challenge runs you can do as well, with various effects to limit yourself or buff enemies, or give yourself an even greater advantage, so there's quite a bit to play with there as well. I would also highly recommend, if you're a fan of deck builders and used to them, that you just entirely skip the story mode unless you're really looking for some tidbits of lore, as the much slower pace, limited options, and focus on bringing back specific items to unlock new items can become a drag. With those out of the way, let's head to the wrap-up. Backpack Hero is a very charming game that I feel is brought down a bit by a number of small problems. However, I do still think it's a very fun game, and if you even remotely like deck builders and either enjoy or don't mind the inventory aspects, I think you can have a lot of fun with it. Thanks for watching, folks. I'd like to give a big thanks to all of you for watching, and to the folks who got me a key for the purposes of this review. For now, I'm going to go back to working on some new stuff, and until next time, take care. As well as, like, when you launch... I also found the overall art and music direction to be fantastic and very